let's talk about episode 13. And what we always like to do is do a little recap. Obviously episodes can be like 4 hours plus. And so you weren't able to catch the entire episode or you forgot maybe what happened. We do a very brief 20-minute recap. And we clip that out as its own YouTube video. It might be what you're watching right now. And if that's the case, we then do a full deep dive discussion on the episode. And you can find that down in the comments if you're watching just the recap. But my man, Will, I think you offered to take the first half today.
Yeah. I will kick us off. So yeah, without further ado, we've got episode 13 of Critical Role. And so we basically pick up, right where we left off last time, which is we've got, Team Dorian and Team Estros arriving in these carriages to this ball. And so within Team Dorian's carriage, they're basically just trying to figure out what their plan is going to be to make this ring swap. Because if you recall, they have like a magically enchanted ring that they are trying to get onto Armand's finger that is a exact duplicate of a ring that he wears. So they're going back and forth on what they should do. They don't really land on anything concrete, but what they do land on is kind of their story, which is that, Dorian is going as himself, Bronte. Fern is going to be his +1, and Orem and Imogen are going to be their servants.
Yeah, there's so much great just commentary around Laura Bailey being the servant and
Maud.
It's like, you're cool not being the date, right? So anyway.
So then in Team Estros's carriage, they're kind of going over what their plan is and, trying to figure out who the members of the quorum are. And, Estros is basically just giving them the lay of the land again. And FCG asks, if stuff does like hit the fan, like, Estros, what do you bring to the table? And he lets them know that he is not skilled in like the arcane, but he is martially capable. So he's more of a fighter. But he does let them know that, hey, your weapons and all your things, like, they're going to take that at the door. So, like, don't bring anything in and, leave your, like, FCG, leave your backpack in the car, yada, yada, yada. So because of this, Laudna puts one of Chetney's chisels in her hair to try to sneak in a weapon. And then Chetney puts another chisel of his inside of FCG because, he's got this, like, void in the middle of him.
See, a bag of... what is it? Bag of holding?
Yeah. Whoa, that would be cool if they could like enchant him to literally be one. Ooh. Anyway, so they arrive and Team Dorian is the first one to kind of arrive and get checked in. Orem does manage to get his shield inside, and he also sneaks a dagger taped to the inside of his thigh in, and he successfully gets away with that. And Dorian manages to talk the guards into letting him go in with this decorative sword. I think he rolls like a deception check or a persuasion check, and he's like, it's never even been used. It's just purely for my outfit. And so they allow him to take that in as well.
It's the gambler's blade.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
And he's put like gems and stuff on it to make it seem ornamental or whatever.
That's right. I forgot it was Bertrand's sword.
Yeah.
So then Team Estros checks in, and Estros does manage to get his staff in. He kind of is playing it up as a walking stick, that he needs as an old man. And they also introduce FCG as kind of Estros's like personal servant, which Estros is kind of uncomfortable with, but he's like, I can't wait to get you some drinks, and is just really playing it up. So the group gets in. Oh, and no one else in Team Estros tries to get in any weapons. They all just leave it all behind. So then we get to like the announcer who is going to announce the people as they enter. So we've been waiting to see if this is maybe where they try out a group name. But unfortunately for Team Dorian, they just announce him as his name, Bronte, second son of the Silken Squall. And a few people turn their heads to kind of look when they enter. But then Estros enters, and, he's just introduced as himself as well. And then a bunch of heads turn and look, because as we know, Estros is kind of a recluse, and a lot of people are surprised to see him attending this event. So anyway, everyone's inside, kind of looking around, and a few people stick out to them immediately. They notice Ella Lumas, who is accompanied by Oshad Breggio, and Ashton notices Gianna Hexam. So one of the first things FCG does is cast Detect Magic and kind of wheels around the room really quick. And he notices that the whole room is aglow. Like everyone is carrying magical items, jewelry, and it's just a lot of people came prepared, or at least came to show off their wealth. So he's doing that. Meanwhile, Imogen reaches out to Orem and lets him know that I've never been in a group of this many people. Like, I may need help if like the voices get too much. And Orem says, "Hey, no worries. I have experience getting people out of rough situations. Consider it done if that's what you need." And she's like, "Okay, awesome, thank you." And around this time, the announcer speaks up and introduces General Ratanish, which hopefully I'm saying that right, who is the leader of the Paragon's Call. And he is accompanied by a group of like 5 or 6 really like rough looking soldiers, as it were, that, basically did the bare minimum to be presentable for this event. But they're like wearing their leathers, and you can tell that these are soldiers. And Ratanish himself is a half giant who appears to be in his 40s, we're told. So the party's, getting going here, and everybody starts to mingle to see what they can find out. And Armand Treshy is also announced around this time, and he is accompanied by a half-elven woman in her 20s. But as soon as they come in and are announced together, they basically immediately part ways and go mingle in different areas. So the party's, sitting around trying to see what they should do first. And this older male goblin approaches the Estros in that group and introduces himself as Headmaster Grease Alakritos. Again, hopefully that pronunciation is okay. Of the Allegiance of Allsight. And he's like, "Hey, I'm an introvert too. I could tell you're kind of not comfortable at these events. So I figured, we could come kind of bond because I'm the same way." And he, like I said, he introduced himself, and he's like, "I'm here with a friend, Ajit Dial." And that immediately perks up Chetney, who is familiar with that name. And he's like, "Oh," and Chetney immediately introduces himself as CC Pop and is trying to set up an introduction with Ajit for Estros so that, Chetney can get in with him as well. And Grease says, "Yeah, I'll try to set that up." He's currently, making the rounds, speaking with other people. And around this time, FCG shows up with drinks for everyone. And per usual, Grease is like, "Whoa, a talking automaton, like, tell me more." But Laden and them have also arrived, and they're like, "Okay, Headmaster Grease, like, what do you do?" And he reveals that he's like studies histories, and he's based it on Corel. And so Laden says, "Oh, we're going to the Heartmoor. Like, can you tell us anything about that?" And he says, "Unfortunately, I've never been. This is actually my first time to Drusar." And so they continue to make small talk, and FCG offers to go get more drinks for everyone. And Ashton tells FCG, "Hey, while you're doing that, keep an eye on Armand Treshy's date. Like, something weird is going on there." Yeah. And he says, "Okay." And as FCG goes around, he decides to cast Detect Good and Evil just to see if anything pings. And Laudna is the only thing that does, pinging as undead from that spell. Alrighty. Meanwhile, back with Team Dorian, Dorian is approached by Lord Preston Drodalon, who introduces himself and, says he's a self-made man who made his fortune in Asilra as Lord of the Quadroads. And Travis immediately perks up at this, and this is something Blake and I'll talk about once we get into the discussion. But pretty fun little cameo here. Anyway, so they get to talking, and Dorian asks Preston about Armand, and Preston says, Armand is the black sheep of his family, so he's always working really hard to justify himself. And Imogen pipes in and is like, "Well, who else should we be like paying attention to at this party?" And Preston points out Gavis, who is, the 9th public member of the quorum. He's a good person to get to know, basically. Meanwhile, Orem, with a super high perception check, has spotted Dorian's brother Cyrus is present at this party, and he's currently talking to Armand's date. Yeah, and so they're like, say again?
I think it was Emoth?
Yeah. And so they're like, "Well, what's going on here?" And around this time, a glass clings, and Gavis is actually taking the stage and is preparing to speak. And he thanks everyone for coming and making Drusar great. And, typical political type of speech here. But somebody calls out from the crowd and is like, "What's going on with these attacks? Like, what's the quorum doing about it?" And he's like, "All that's being considered, don't worry about it. But like, now is not the time. If you want to talk to me and thus the quorum, like, come find me in private. We're at a party right now." And basically, again, thanks everybody, toast to the city, and then music begins to play. Um, so after this, Ashton has decided, you know what, I got to go see what's going on with Armand's date. And so he walks over there and sees that she's like sitting alone in a chair, and he tries to make small talk with her to see if like what he can glean, but Taliesin rolls really poorly, and so she eventually just gets up and walks away from him. And so while all these things are happening like simultaneously, by the way, so back with Dorian, he and Fern have decided what they're going to do to get Armand's attention to hopefully swap this ring out is do like a fancy dance that, you know, Fern is familiar with back from her time at the court. And Dorian's like, oh, I haven't done that in forever, but, you know, just show me the moves and we'll do it. So they're doing that, and Imogen relays this telepathically to FCG and is like, can you help them out? So he casts enhance ability on them, increasing their charisma to hopefully make their dance better. Again, as all this is going on, Gavis actually approaches and is like blown away at FCG once again, being like, whoa, whose automaton is this? Like, I'll pay, like, come claim him. I'm blown away by this. And so because of that, Dorian and Fern kind of introduce themselves, and he can immediately tell that they are like not from around here because they don't know who he is. And they ask about the Paragon's call, and he says that, you know, they're here due to safety concerns in the city. Like, they're at the ball to keep an eye on things. And he explains that the dance of the Crossroads is about to happen, which Fern's like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that. And what that essentially is, you know,
it's
people
like,
just
favorite part.
yeah. He's like, I thought you were new. That you basically, it's a big dance. People just keep switching partners, and it's a great way to break the ice and kind of make new political connections and new friends and everything. And basically, after he explains that, he's like, I'm bored of you, and just walks away to go talk to other people. And so Orem during this has walked over to Chetney and basically fills him in on the fact that Cyrus is here. And he tells Chetney, like, hey, go take care of this, like, get him out of here. It's too dangerous for him to be here. And so Chetney's like, okay, I'm on it. And as he goes off to do that, the band begins to play, and they are starting the dance of the Crossroads. And that's actually where we go to break. So if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, sure. The second half of this episode can be summarized as everything goes bad and everyone rolls less than 10. So they're just so it gets a little confusing because there's so many things happening simultaneously. And on the same token, everything they're trying to do is requiring an additional roll, and they're always rolling really bad. And Matt actually did not well, I'll get to that in a second. So the dance starts, and Dorian and Fern are beginning their plan of trying to get to Armand to maybe get the ring slipped off him. And Imogen is also thinking about using her telekinetic powers to slip the ring off. Now, they practiced this in the little wagon as they were arriving, and Matt pretty clearly kind of inferred, like, hey, this would be really clunky to try to pull off someone.
Yeah.
And I almost felt it was kind of like a DM like tip, like, may not be the best way to do it, but in typical fashion, they do it anyway. And so what ends up happening is Fern is dancing with Preston, who's just totally infatuated with her, and is inviting her to, you know, anytime you're in EOS, you need to come visit, you need to come see me. And Fern actually notices that his clothing is actually, at closer look, like this up close, is actually a bit tattered. And you get this sense of actually someone who is a bit washed up and is actually kind of portraying themselves as just a noblesque, luxurious type of person. And Fern actually feels kind of sorry for him and lets him down easy and says, you know, I don't think you're my type. But he is still just, you know, completely infatuated with her.
Yeah.
She gets spun over and cuts in to Dancing with Armand. And instantly she introduces herself as being from the Feywild. And I think it's Imogen who does detect thoughts. And he is just really put off by her. Like, because he knows the Night King, the Nightmare King, and knows he's from the Feywild as well. So he's like, is this someone working with the Nightmare King? What's going on? Why, you know, I'm just so sick of these people. Like, what's just very distraught about it. Well, they kind of have this sort of cat and mouse conversation where they're being coy with one another. And then she actually asks who she should be speaking to. and he points over to Gavis. And as he's doing that, he twirls her, and she uses that moment to pop on the ring, and actually does it so forcefully that it actually like there's like almost like a pop, like a not dislocating, but like an audible pop of his thumb.
Yeah, pops
where the
off
ring,
the ring.
Yeah, where it goes off his thumb and onto the floor, and he's like, seriously? It's just like, what is your problem?
Yeah.
Well, Fern kicks the ring so that it, tink, 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 like goes, off into the crowd. And then it becomes very frantic all of a sudden. So Orem is like, I have the fake ring. And he's like walking over to be like, hi, I think you dropped this. And Imogen's screaming at him, being like, pick up the ring, pick up the ring, pick up the ring. And he's like, I have the ring, I have the ring. And they're just not on the same page. Like she wants him to get the real ring, but he's like, that ring doesn't matter because I have
like
this
pretend
one.
You're picking it up type of thing.
Yeah. So finally he shuts her out of his head and then basically arrives to try to give it to him. But Armand is kind of like, he rolls really poorly. And so Armand's like, who is this idiot? I don't have time for you. And begins like walking off looking for the ring. This shenanigan continues for a little bit where even Orem walks by and is like, hey, I think I saw your ring over there. And again, Armand is kind of like, and actually he has a Minotaur sidekick that he basically looks at and says, keep an eye on this guy.
Yeah.
So, long story short, it's actually FCG who actually picks up the real ring eventually, while Imogen is kind of pretending as like the servant to be like, I'm looking for it, I'm trying to find it. And what ends up happening is Dorian ends up throwing the ring over the crowd into Fern's hand. This is like the worst possible plan ever. And then Fern is like, I think you dropped this. And Armand is kind of like, just pissed off and is like, what a bunch of weirdos. Puts the fake ring on, thinking that it's been retrieved, and goes back about his business. So they've successfully got the ring on him. Meanwhile, Ashton had picked up that Emoth, I can't remember how to say her name, was sort of waiting for a cue to do something sort of nefarious. And she, as this commotion is happening, slips away into like this back hallway, which Chetney notices. And Chetney actually had gone over to Cyrus to be like, dude, what the heck are you doing here? Like, why are you here? What's going on? And he actually mentions that he's here like under an alter ego, Lord, if I can find it, Lord Dirtanya, I think. Yeah,
I think so.
And basically says like, I'm here for Lady Emoth. She's done some old business with the Corsairs, and we just have some business together. It's very strange. It's like, why would you have business with this woman who seems kind of evil because she's here with Armand? Well, so she slips into the back hallway. Chetney's kind of like, oh, like, well, where's she going? And decides he wants to follow her. There are guards blocking the door, so he casts invisibility to sort of sneak back into that hallway. And then also Cyrus actually distracts them by asking where the bathroom is, which he doesn't realize it's Cyrus. He's just like, oh, this is my moment to kind of sneak in. So using his keen wolf scent, he actually picks up that Emoth has gone into one of the doors, like in this hallway. And also in this whole process, continuing the theme of rolling really poorly, he rolls like, I don't know, like a 2, I think, in a stealth check.
Yeah.
Like walks right into a table and like, doesn't just knock it. It's like totally like a pot falls over or something. It's just, so the guards are actually going through, like trying to like find him. And all that to say, they don't discover him. He goes to the door, he listens into the door and hears like this heavy grinding sound. There's also like this really strong musty odor that he can't really quite figure out. So turns the knob and it's unlocked, and he peeks inside and it seems like to be a suite room, but he doesn't really see anyone, but there's like dressers, kind of just a nicer place. And then Lady Emoth comes to the door almost like in this supernatural speed, and he kind of jumps back and sort of hides against the wall to kind of like make himself small. And he notices that she is sweating and seems to be really anxious. She shuts the door, locks it. He goes back out to the ball. And around this time in the ball, what's happening is Volley Dertrana, the business commissioner, actually spots Ashton. And the great moment of this is he spots Ashton. He goes over to General Ratanish and kind of points like, hey, you know, something's going on with that guy. And Ratanish starts walking over. And Ashton really proudly says, like, well, I'm wearing a mask, so he doesn't know it's me. And then everyone's like, yeah, but it's the mask of the Nightmare King. And he's like, oh, crap, right. That's you're right. So Volley's obviously recognized this mask and sent Ratanish over. Ratanish comes over and is like, hey, where'd you get the mask? What's going on? And it's kind of like, you know, typical like bodyguard, like what's going on here? Like kind of bouncer-esque.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, a friend gave it to me, and rolls poorly again. And Ratanish actually rips the mask off his face to get a good look at him. And then Ashton, in response, slaps him. And Ratanish then slaps him back. And it was kind of like, you know, an old like tiff you see in movies with like two nobles where they decide like they slap one another and then like we need to settle this with like with a duel. And that's what they actually decide to do, is they're going to go outside and settle this with a duel. And Ratanish actually grabs him by the shoulder to sort of forcefully walk him out. And Ashton rolls, I think, like a natural 20 or a dirty 20 and just like, you know, throws him off him. And the crowd, by the way, is like really getting energized, like, ooh, this could be really fun. So people are actually heading out of the ballroom now to basically see this happen. Ladna, by the way, has just been dancing with people and was like, okay, I guess nothing's really important happening with me, so I'll just, you know, jump in with this. And then also, as people are kind of like moving their way out, Chetney looks around and realizes he doesn't see Cyrus anywhere. And he remembers, oh, that was Cyrus who helped me sneak into the hallway before. He must still be in that hallway. And he was looking for Lady Emoth. So he's like, crap, I have to go make sure he's okay.
Yeah.
So he ducks back into the hallway, doesn't see him, goes back over to the door, notices that the lock has been broken, and he realizes he can step inside. He hears in a back room a commotion between two people, and in this immediate suite room are these small, shadowy creatures who are like scurrying through stuff and like pocketing stuff. And they are the Shade Creepers that we saw early on in the campaign.
Yep.
It's in this moment where Lady Emoth, in her supernatural speed, comes out from this back room, you know, sort of bolts to the door. And instead of just sweating, she now, in a very Duggar fashion, has this liquid mucus kind of coming from her pores, black beady eyes, and she shuts the door. And that's basically how the episode ends.
Yeah.
So pretty crazy stuff.
It was.
A lot of stuff all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And a lot of really bad rolls too.
Yeah.